Are pests destroying your garden before it's even had a chance to thrive? Don't let them win. Today we're going to talk about some organic pest control methods that actually work. We're going to talk about 5 key strategies that will help you fight back against the pests destroying your garden. So let's dive into it. The first key strategy to dealing with pests is prevention. And when we talk about prevention, we really want to talk about healthy soil. Healthy soil is a key to a healthy garden, and that's also true when it comes to pests. So make sure that you amend your soil before you plant in it. Having fertilizer, compost, and other nutrients that your plants are going to need throughout the growing season is very key to preventing pests from getting in there in the first place. Pests don't really like healthy plants. They like stressed out plants. So even if you do have some pest damage, but your plants are pretty healthy, more than likely they're going to be able to bounce back a lot easier, a lot quicker. The next important point when it comes to keeping your plants healthy and prevention is going to be consistent moisture. Because if your plants are fighting to maintain their moisture level, if they're fighting just to find water in the soil, they're going to be really stressed out. And again, stressed out plants lead to more pest issues. It's also important to remove dead leaves and dead plant matter. So you don't want this to collect on the soil surface because it provides a hiding place for pests and it also attracts them. So take your dead plant matter, your dead leaves, any diseased or decaying, dying off leaves, take those directly out of the beds to keep your beds nice and clean and well kept. Another important point when it comes to prevention is not over fertilizing. This can be a tricky one because I like to fertilize my plants, and I have went through this in the past where I've gotten a little bit too carried away with fertilizing or fertilizing a little bit too often. And that nice green growth, it looks really pretty. But by putting all of that energy into growing, your plants are going to be a little bit more stressed out, and over-fertilizing can actually attract pests into your garden. Something else to keep in mind is crop rotation. A lot of times in the backyard garden, we don't do as much with crop rotation because we're not really monocropping the same way that you have in big ag and big farm. But crop rotation can be beneficial, especially if you've noticed pests, particular overgrowth of pests the season before. Rotating your plants to a new location can kind of help mitigate those pest issues and keep the pest populations down. Key strategy number 2 is companion planting. Now, there's a lot of information out there when it comes to companion planting. Some of it's anecdotal, some of it's just lies, but there is some scientific basis to companion planting. For instance, marigold planted near your tomatoes can deter nematodes. Garlic is another really good companion plant, and it deters a lot of different types of pests. I won't go into all of them, but one of the main ones being aphids. Aphids can wreak havoc in a garden, and a lot of gardeners deal with them. Another option is planting trap plants. These are plants that are going to attract those pests, and the theory is that they kind of help keep them away from plants that you don't want them on. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that nasturtiums are a really good trap plant, and they will kind of help keep certain pests off of your cucumbers and squash and plants like that. Another side note to that is planting things that bring in beneficial insects. So you have things like ladybugs and lacewings. They will help kind of control those insect populations. Ladybugs are especially good for controlling aphids. So anything that you can plant to bring those into your garden is going to be beneficial. Nectar-rich flowers like cosmos and dill are going to attract those predatory insects. That's going to help kind of keep those populations of pests down. Something else to think about is attracting birds into your garden. So birds will deal with your grasshoppers and lots of different insects. Birds like to eat insects. So if you can put a bird feeder nearby your garden, you might be able to use the birds to kind of help keep those populations down as well. Key strategy number 3 is protecting your young seedlings. Now, young seedlings are tender, and there are a lot of different things that are going to want to eat your tender young seedlings. So this is especially true when you direct sow directly in your garden. I do this a lot. And one of the things you can do is add some netting. Netting is going to protect against all of your insects because it creates a physical barrier that insects can't penetrate to get to your plants. So I deal with a lot of things like slugs in my garden, and slugs like to eat my tender young seedlings, even lizards. Lizards will eat my tender young seedlings. So by providing that netting and keeping my plants covered for as long as I can, I give them the best chance to begin growing and establishing some leaves so that even if pests do come in later, they're at a big enough height and they're healthy and strong enough that they can withstand that pest pressure. Key strategy number 4 is going to be your organic pesticides. Now, we want to take care when we're adding anything to our plants, any type of sprays, because even if it's organic, that means it might be safe for you, it might be safe for your pets, but it can still be detrimental to the beneficial insects that we want to attract into our garden, like bees. You just want to be mindful that it's not going to discriminate against good bugs and bad bugs. But to control pest populations, and maybe even as a prevention, organic pesticides do have their place in the garden. Neem oil is pretty broad spectrum, and it's going to help prevent against a lot of pest infestations, specifically aphids that we talked about earlier. And the best way to apply this, the best way really to apply all of your pesticides that I've found, is doing it in the evening. If you do it in the evening, bees aren't really out. You don't have as much of the beneficial insects out in the evening time as you do in the early morning. Also, this kind of helps prevent against the sun beating down on the leaves and causing leaf burn. Because using neem oil or overusing neem oil, there can be some leaf burn that happens. I've had this happen before, where you wind up with yellow spots on your leaves because the sun begins to beat down and the neem oil is on the leaves. And like I said, neem oil is going to treat a lot of different things. All of your aphid families, and a lot of your other small insects that are just too numerous to mention. You can use neem oil on a schedule if you want to as a prevention. You can also use it to treat plants if you have something like an aphid infestation, but it's really best used as a prevention. You would use neem oil every 7 to 10 days. And there are different types of neem oil. I actually like to buy ones that are already pre-mixed so I don't have to do any mixing. But you can buy neem oil that you mix with water and just spray on the tops and underside of the leaves. So when it comes to dealing with something like squash bugs, best method I found is a soapy water solution. And I spray that again directly on the bugs toward the evening time at the base of the plant. It will actually kill them on contact. Dealing with the squash bug eggs though, the soapy water solution isn't going to kill them. So to deal with those, you're going to want to check your plants regularly. You should go out something like every day during the height of bug season and squish those eggs. You're going to find that they look copper in color and there are clusters of them, usually on the underside of your squash plant leaves. You just squish them off. Alternatively, you can use a hose and put it on a high power setting and spray them off the underside of the leaves. This is a really effective method. When it comes to squash bugs as well, if you don't want to do the soapy water solution, you can actually hand pick those off and then just drown them in a container of water. And I'm curious to know, what pests are you battling most in your garden? A lot of the pests that we deal with are regional. So I may deal with squash bugs and squash vine borers, but I know my friends out in California don't deal with that because they're on the West Coast. So leave me some comments down below. Let me know what pests you're dealing with. One of my other nemesis is the squash vine borer. This thing is gross. It's horrible. It has wrecked my squash plants year after year after year. And the squash vine borer, what they do is they actually burrow into the stem of the squash plant. So the egg is laid by a moth, butterfly looking thing, and it's usually laid on a stem. And it looks similar to the squash bug eggs, but instead of it being in a cluster of multiple eggs, there's just one, usually. And what happens is, as that egg hatches, the larvae comes out and it begins to burrow into the stem of your squash plant. And you'll notice that your leaves all of a sudden begin to wilt, they begin to die, and it really kills the plant from the inside out. These things are terrible. The best thing I have found to deal with these is, one, prevention. So again, that netting for your young squash plants. I don't remove the netting a lot of times for my squash plants until they begin to flower. But even then, I've still dealt with a lot of squash vine borer infestations and a lot of my squash plants succumbing to this nasty little creature. But if you have a vining squash plant, you can kind of encourage it to root in another place along the stem, and this will help keep that plant going, even if it has that squash vine borer inside of it. The thing about this is, though, usually by the time there's a squash vine borer, it's too late for that plant to be able to create new roots and really begin growing again. So a lot of times it's best just to remove the plant and replant. But there are a lot of resistant varieties to the squash vine borer. Specifically, most of your winter squash varieties are going to be resistant. So you can, when you're shopping for seeds, look for varieties that say resistant to the squash vine borer and plant those instead if you deal with a lot of squash vine borers in your area. When it comes to slugs and snails specifically, I like to use diatomaceous earth. Now, again, this is not going to discriminate against good bugs and bad bugs, so use this with caution. I use it at night around the base of my plants. It does a really good job at getting rid of them. And the reason why is it's made up of crushed oyster shells. Now, you want to use food grade diatomaceous earth. That's really important. But it's made of these crushed oyster shells and actually will irritate things like slugs and snails and cause them to dry up and die as they move across it. You can also use copper tape on the outside edges of your beds. Another really effective thing for slugs and snails specifically is going to be beer traps. Now, this can be a little bit harder to do if your plants are spaced really close together, but the idea here is you take something small, you fill it with beer, you kind of bury it into the soil a little bit just so the top is out of the soil, and as snails crawl toward your plants or away from your plants, they get stuck in that beer and they die. But the most effective thing to deal with slugs and snails and even things like tomato hornworms is going to be hand removing them. Now, these are nocturnal bugs, so you're going to want to remove them toward the evening time, toward the night time. You can bring out a flashlight or a black light when it comes to tomato hornworms specifically to be able to see them easier and just hand pick them off. And speaking of tomato hornworms and really anything in that caterpillar family, one of the things you can do is BT. BT is a natural thing that's found in soil. It's actually a bacteria. And again, just like neem oil, you can find BT that's already mixed, it's already pre-made that you can buy, or you can find BT that you mix up with water. You can use this on your plants if you notice that you already have tomato hornworms, but it's actually better as a prevention. And just like neem oil, it's going to be on that 7 to 10 day schedule when pests are most prevalent. And I use BT mainly when it comes to tomato hornworms or the cabbage worm, but really it targets anything in that caterpillar family. So if you were to do a schedule of maybe neem oil and BT as a prevention, what you could do is do them both every 7 days or every 10 days, and you would space them out. Like, let's say you do neem oil on Saturday, maybe you do your BT then on Wednesday. This is actually the schedule that I'm using right now. In the past, I've not used BT and neem oil much as a preventative because I had this kind of thought process of only using them if I absolutely needed them, which is the way to go for most places. I'm in Florida. Bugs are ridiculous, and I'm already seeing a lot of damage on my plants. I've had to replant a few times already. So I'm implementing this preventative schedule, but I'm doing so, like I said, with caution because I want to be very considerate of bees and other things that are coming to the garden. Key strategy number 5 is going to be timing and correct varieties. The thing is that most of your plants that succumb to pests, it's because they're planted outside of their normal growing season window. If we try to plant things too early, or we try to plant things too late, or we try to get things to grow during the summer that are better in the spring or the fall, this is when we're going to deal with a lot of those pest issues because those plants are not meant to grow at that time of year. And a lot of gardeners will try to kind of push the envelope. I've done this a lot where I push the envelope about, getting my lettuces through warmer times of the year. But the truth be told, it's best to plant them at the right time, at the time that they're going to thrive and they're going to grow well for you. And like I alluded to when it comes to we were talking about the winter squash being resistant to the squash vine borer. That's true with a lot of different varieties. So you can look on the back of your seed packets when you're shopping to find varieties that are resistant to whatever pest you're dealing with in your garden. So in conclusion, pests are going to be something that you probably deal with in your backyard garden at some point. The height of pest season is usually in the latter part of the spring and the early to mid parts of the summer. We've only talked about a few different types of pests here, but those are some of the most common ones that you deal with. And again, leave me some comments down below. Let me know what you're dealing with in your garden. Let me know what you found to fight pests in your garden or what methods you might be using. Let me know if any of these methods were helpful to you or if there's anything from this video that you're gonna try and implement this year in your growing season. I thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna leave a video on your screen until the next one comes out. May your garden be full of grace, and may you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.